the City Council, the Attorney General's Office representatives, and citizens and others desiring to listen into tonight's presentation. Before we begin the meeting, I need to read a determination since we are doing this virtually at an anchor location. And the determination states, pursuant to Utah Code annotated 52-42074, the city's mayor, as the chair of the city council, hereby determines that conducting the meeting of this body on this date at an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. It is well recognized that a global pandemic currently exists related to the COVID-19 coronavirus, which has the potential to overwhelm Utah's healthcare system. Therefore, due to the state of emergency caused by the global pandemic, I find that conducting a meeting at an anchor location under the current state of public health emergency constitutes a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the location. Therefore, again, we're meeting virtually. Now, referring back to tonight's agenda, the agenda only has one item for this work session, and it is a report on the August 2nd, 2020 demonstration and police response. This report tonight was requested by the City Council soon after the August 2nd incident, so that the City Council could be advised by an independent expert whether the city's response was appropriate under applicable laws and law enforcement practices in the state. I, for one, appreciate the great deal of time and effort invested by the AG's office over several months to analyze the August 2nd incident. Now, I recognize there is sensitive information will be presented concerning a very difficult day in our community of Cottonwood Heights. I believe that our focus needs to be beyond understanding the findings, determining the implications, and moving forward in a way that promotes healing and respect for all individuals in our community. Now, because the AG's office has requested that they be allowed to present their report without interruption, all of the meeting attendees, including the City Council, will be able to listen to the presentation, but won't be allowed to ask questions or make comments. The public will be able to make any comments concerning the AG's report at any future business meeting of the City Council, which begins at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesdays of each month, except for holidays. Now, the next City Council business meeting for this purpose will begin at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 18th. Now, the City Council may submit written questions to the AG's office after tonight's reports, which will be responded to by the AG's office in the coming days based upon their available time and resources. The AG's office may submit the AG's office has informed the city that a written summary of their report will be submitted to the city following tonight's presentation. The city will then post this report on the city's website when it is received. Now I'd like to turn the time over to, I think it's Spencer Austin, is that right? Who's the Chief Deputy of the Utah State Attorney General's Office. Spencer.
Hi, Mayor Peterson, but Matt Thompson will be handling the presentation this evening.
All right, thank you, Matt. So welcome, and we'll turn the time over to you, and appreciate your time and efforts.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome to all, and thanks for your attention. This audit, as is the case with any audit, is an opportunity to use time and hindsight to look at the events, practices, strategies, issues, or anything else that is requested of the auditors. In this case, we have the ability to view dozens of hours of video and audio tapes in real time and in slow motion. We were able to rerun and reevaluate every interaction we observed and to critique and make recommendations based upon all those factors. What this audit does not account for is the emotion, the environment, or the real or perceived threat to those in the situation making the decisions. This audit is for the purpose of recommendations made with hindsight, using the mentioned advantages and tools. This audit is not for the purpose of criticism or second guessing of individuals who were in the heat of the battle, nor is it an investigation being conducted for any other purpose. Nothing in the audit was obtained through legal process or rules of evidence. It was volunteered and provided by those willing to cooperate that could speak to any specific questions that we had based upon our own observations of the same video and audio that you all see tonight. Much of the material that you'll see tonight was found in the public spaces of the internet, which is accessible to anyone. When the Attorney General's office received this assignment, it assigned Special Agent Ed Spann as the case agent. Agent Spann recruited me, Special Agent Matt Thompson, to assist him with the work on this case. Agent Spann has been in law enforcement for 44 years in the state of Utah. He's been a patrolman, detective, SWAT member, supervisor, administrator, and just about everything in between. He's worked with state, local, tribal, and federal law enforcement on criminal cases and is a highly decorated police veteran in the state of Utah. Agent Spann has extensive training and experience with investigating major crimes. He has extensive training in defensive tactics, less lethal defensive weapons, force science, and policies related to these issues. Agent Spann has experience investigating uses of force issues and is currently assigned to one of the officer-involved critical incident protocol teams in the Salt Lake Valley. Agent Spann currently is assigned to the Special Investigations Public Corruption Unit at the AG's office. I've been in law enforcement for 22 years in Utah. I've worked as a patrolman, detective, and a special agent now. I've worked with officer-involved critical incident protocol teams, served as a member of a homicide task force and major crimes investigations teams. I have experience with conducting internal investigations and evaluating uses of force. I was a field training officer and I'm now a firearms instructor and armorer for my agency. And I'm also currently assigned to the Special Investigations Public Corruption Unit at the AG's office. Just to make mention, we work closely with prosecutors at our office on this case who have many decades of experience in private and public practice in our state. So what we'll do in this presentation is to first walk you all through the August 2nd, 2020 incident. We'll show some video clips and maps, photos to help illustrate the event as a whole and more specific incidents as well. We'll then outline the audit points as far as police response, policies, ordinance, laws, use of force, arrests, and the roles of some individuals. The materials included in this presentation are protected government records. Any copies, use, or distribution of these materials without express permission from the Utah Attorney General's office is prohibited. Also, we should mention that we're mindful that some people who were involved in this incident have been criminally charged and that their court cases are still pending. Anyone charged in this event is presumed innocent until proven otherwise in court. And just a warning about the sorts of materials included in this presentation. We have not edited it for any profanity, etc. If there are any parents with kids attending this meeting, please be advised. So the background of the incident is as follows. On August 2nd, 2020, at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, about 130 to 150 people gathered at and around the pavilion at Mill Hollow Park in Cottonwood Heights City. The event had been advertised on social media as March for Justice with the hashtags Dance Dance for Revolution and Black Lives Matter. These are still photos taken from video footage of the actual gathering. The black and white flyer on the left screen is a copy of the actual ad of the event that we copied from open sources of the internet. As seen in the flyer, the event was advertised to meet at the Mill Hollow Park. At a point that afternoon, as the event was underway, members of the Cottonwood Heights Police Department met with some in the group as they moved from the park to the streets. Certain members of that group and police had physical confrontations in the street. Several of the event members were arrested. Some police officers and some event members were injured in the confrontation. Following the incident, the city called on the Utah Attorney General's office to conduct an audit or review of this incident. We were asked to consider the following points specifically. Did the protesters violate any laws or ordinances? Was the event properly permitted? Was the use of public property or streets lawful? Did the police have a need or a duty to respond? Was the response appropriate? What improvements could be made? Were the response and actions of the police commensurate with the actions of the protesters? Were there any issues of excessive force? Were any officers or uninvolved civilians injured or assaulted? How many arrests occurred? The city also asked that we specifically consider What role did Councilmember Natalie Bruce have in the incident? And what role did Police Chief Robbie Russo have in the incident? So we acknowledge that this review is a pretty broad scope, but we believe that the work we've done in this case accurately and adequately addresses each of these points. So how did we approach or accomplish this review? We conducted a review by using a mix of materials that we collected. The materials included police reports, body-worn and in-car camera footage, dispatch records, as well as content we sought after and found independently, such as videos we found in the public spaces of the internet, video that witnesses provided us, and interviews with witnesses we sought out and conducted ourselves. In this review, we examined about 140 videos or video clips. This amounts to just under 42 hours of footage. We reviewed each video several times in this process. We reviewed 1 hour and 22 minutes of dispatch radio traffic. We took calls from and or met with 10 citizens who had input or actually witnessed some of this. 2 of the citizens were represented by counsel and were not formally interviewed. We interviewed each of the Cottonwood Heights officers who were present during the incident, which included 5 officers, 2 sergeants, a master sergeant, a lieutenant, and the chief. We also interviewed the assistant chief and another of the Cottonwood Heights police sergeants. We reviewed over 500 pages of police reports, which also included witness statements, medical reports, transcripts, charging documents, and other case-related documents. And while it's true that we reviewed many hours of video footage and spent hours in interviews with the involved people, we don't pretend that we've reviewed every video that exists, nor interviewed every witness there may be. In fact, we know we haven't seen every video, photo, or audio recording that could be out there. We know that some of the news stations have photographers at the event. We know that the Cottonwood Heights Police tried to get copies of the footage from one of the local news stations and that the station refused to provide it. We should also mention that while it's true that we work closely with Cottonwood Heights Police and city officials in collecting case materials, we did not take direction from them as to how we'd conduct this review or to whom we would or would not speak. So we began the review process with city and the police department. We wanted to find out who was involved with the incident and what they knew of it. We found from speaking with city leaders and members of the police department, including Lieutenant Bartlett, that the police department found out about the event just days before the event happened. Lieutenant Bartlett reached out to the statewide Intelligence Analysis Center and the Salt Lake Police Department about previous events the group had done in Utah. No major issues were reported and no noteworthy intelligence was apparently found about the group. The city hadn't received any permit applications or communications from the event group to request assistance. Also, Lieutenant Bartlett reported to us that the city had 2 previous protests and that the events went without major incident. Lieutenant Bartlett reported that for those incidents, he had officers standing by unseen in the station, but that they were never deployed because there was never a need. He expected there wouldn't be any problem with the August 2nd event. So Lieutenant Bartlett's plan for the August 2nd event was to watch from a distance and not intervene unless necessary. Lieutenant Bartlett briefed officers and his command staff of the plan. And then the day of the event, Lieutenant Bartlett held over the day shift patrol officers, briefed them and the officers for the oncoming shift. So Lieutenant Bartlett planned to monitor the event himself and to call for officers if needed. And Lieutenant Bartlett directed officers to stay away from the event unless called. So just to familiarize everybody with the area involved with this incident, this slide, it's an overhead map view of Mill Hollow Park and the adjacent neighborhood. So the park is seen here in the lower right corner, and then the main roadway here is Hollow Mill Drive. There we go. There we go. As the event was underway, Lieutenant Bartlett had gone to the area and was observing it from the distance. He was in an unmarked police car and dressed in plain clothes. This is some video of the event taken by the event goers themselves. The event set up and used the pavilion at Mill Hollow Park, and event organizers talked over a loudspeaker to the event goers. Lieutenant Bartlett didn't report seeing any issues until a point when an SUV driven by a counter-protester came through the area. The driver blew an air horn as he drove through. The disruption can be heard in the attached video. The SUV left and then returned. When the SUV returned, individuals from the event group were reported to have thrown objects, water bottles, at the SUV. The driver actually called police to report that the event goers had thrown objects at his SUV. When he noticed the potential problem the counter-protesters might cause, Lieutenant Bartlett called for a uniformed officer to come to the area to stop the SUV and tell the driver to leave the area, which they did.
Protesting, and they're still going strong. Don't mind them. You know, there's a saying, don't let a barking dog.
After having met at the park pavilion for a time, Lieutenant Bartlett reported that he saw the event group leave the park on foot, going onto westbound Hollow Mill Drive. As the group took to the street, it occupied the entire width of the street. The group walked west from the park on Hollow Mill Drive, carrying signs, chanting, and playing music from a loudspeaker. As seen in this video, the group soon consumed the entire breadth of the street from curb to curb. The group also had some vehicles intermingled in the crowd that took up both travel lanes at times. Lieutenant Bartlett called patrol officers to come to the area and to make contact with the event members and to order them from the streets with the option to continue the event on the sidewalk. Lieutenant Bartlett didn't report, nor did we see evidence that the police intended or attempted to shut down the event entirely or to have the group disperse. Rather, what we observed was the reported intent to have the group get out of the streets.
Whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
Show me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like!
Show me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like!
Show me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like!
It truly is, and we're going to do this until
Lieutenant Bartlett reported that he noticed two of the event organizers who walked at the back end of the event group procession, and that one of the two men open carried a handgun on his hip. The other male had what looked like a handgun holstered on his hip but covered with his shirt. It also appeared as though the men were not allowing traffic into or around the procession.
To the units coming in from the east, be advised that there's a male at the back of the thing, open carry. Gray pants, white shirt, black hat, goatee.
So again, the group moved from the park to the streets and headed west on Hollow Mill Drive. As mentioned, Lieutenant Bartlett ordered patrol officers and marked police vehicles to go to the front end of the group's march and to order the group to the sidewalks. Officers made first contact with the group just a few hundred yards away from the park. The officers parked police vehicles in the street and met face-to-face with the pedestrians. We should mention that some of the video in this presentation and part of our review came from Councilmember Natalie Bruce's Facebook page. She had apparently live streamed the event as a participant. This is one of those videos. Also, what we noticed in some of the videos was that it seemed that certain members of the event group were the leaders or were otherwise directing the event as a whole. We see in several video examples where it isn't the police who stop the crowd, it's the event organizers who stop the crowd short of where the police arrive, and it's the event organizers, for the most part, who interface with the police. In this video, one of the event organizers tried to stop Councilmember Bruce as she walked to where the police had arrived in the street for the first contact with the crowd. Councilmember Bruce told the person that she was a council member and continued to where the police had met the group members.
Really? I'm a city councilwoman.
Not keep walking the street, get out of the road.
We noticed that the event organizers seemed to be dressed similarly. They wore white t-shirt with Simgill's name on them. Some wore chest packs and they carried walkie-talkies. In this officer's body cam footage, you can see some of the event organizers and event members meeting with officers at the point of first contact. Again, it's just a handful of organizers who meet with the police. The event group itself is stopped a back a ways from where the police actually parked. Officers told the event organizers that the group would need to continue the march from the sidewalks. Some of the event organizers immediately argued with the officers. They argued the legality of the officers' orders, that they believed that the law allowed for the event group's activities in the streets. Some organizers shouted refusals at the officers. Officers continued attempts to negotiate to a point that some of the organizers agreed to try to get the event members to move to the sidewalks.
More people than can be on the sidewalk. We can legally be in the street.
Look, though, do a favor for me. Look this way behind you. Look behind you.
No.
Look, there is room right there.
I'm not going to do you a favor. I'm
there.
going to do my Second Amendment right.
This is another video example of how the officers interacted with the event organizers, trying to negotiate a means by which the event could both comply with the law and continue. As can be seen, some of the organizers seemed determined to argue with officers rather than compromise. At about this point, officers radioed dispatch for additional officers when it became apparent that negotiations with the event organizers wasn't going very well.
Just keep going and we'll stay peaceful.
So can we do it? What our explanation is, can you guys just go down the sidewalk?
There's too many of us to stay on the
There's
sidewalk.
actually not. How about you try it?
Well, you asked me a question. Can I finish my answer?
over in the street. As long as you're good with that.
If we are on the sidewalks and there are cars coming back and forth, we got hit by a car today.
Okay.
Just that didn't like what we think. So there's not safely a way that we can be on the sidewalks with cars going past and still doing our demonstration.
Okay.
If we keep moving and we have the streets blocked off where every other police department has had no problem.
But Commonwealth Heights, we're not going to set it. We're not going to do that.
And that's the fucking
That's
problem.
fine. And you guys don't need to do shit. We have our own security detail. We have cars that will keep everybody safe.
Yeah,
We just can't
illegal, though.
Hold on.
Go down the sidewalks. Go down the sidewalks and protest where you guys
We
would
will
like
try to
at
keep
the end.
everyone on the sidewalks
that's
as fast
all we
as we
can
can.
ask. Yep.
If you guys leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. We'll try to keep everyone on the sidewalk,
Just
all right?
do the best you can. That's all we can ask
Great.
for, okay?
Good deal. Good deal.
Appreciate it
Thank
very
you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir Hanley, does the First Amendment apply to Cottonwood Heights?
The First Amendment, of course it does, ma'am. All we want you to do, though, is just walk on the sidewalk.
There's
all
too many of us on the
There's
sidewalk.
not- Why don't you try it out?
That is the law.
The law is
If there's
correct.
too many people to protest.
There's
on
not
the
too many
sidewalk.
people here. This is a small protest.
This is going to be a lawsuit.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay. We'll just go
Officer
around you
Hartley?
guys then.
Guys,
Why doesn't this guy have a
what's your name,
tag?
sir?
Why is he not identified?
So enjoy your day, enjoy your protest, and do the best you can.
We will.
Officer Hardy. Appreciate it.
We will.
Thanks.
Following contact with the police, the event moved westward on Hollow Mill Drive, going by the police vehicles. Many of the pedestrians moved to and then stayed on the sidewalks. The event group may have understood at that point that they needed to at least do the best they could to stay on the sidewalks. They passed by the first contact point, and while many moved to the sidewalks, some remained in the streets. The event-related vehicles also moved with the group. One of the event organizers is heard to tell someone in one of the vehicles to play a certain song and to turn it up. The song was a vulgar rap song where lyrics such as "F the police" are heard. Lieutenant Bartlett had in fact ordered that the officers not allow the event vehicles to pass, but that the pedestrians can come by only. Lieutenant Bartlett's orders were apparently not received, and officers are heard telling the group to do the best they could to stay on the sidewalks.
Play it right now, right now. Everybody. Play that. Hey, bump that shit as loud as you can. Everybody on the sidewalks, sidewalks, please.
Thank you guys.
So the vehicles can drive. Block the road. Yeah, no problem with the vehicles drive.
Oh, vehicles can drive.
Let the car through.
Justice for Zane Zane.
Right about now, we got the way forward, full face. In the case of NWA versus the police department, prosecuting attorneys are Ice Cube, motherfucking Ice Cube, you wanna tell the truth, the whole truth.
Just let them go.
Yeah, I am. I'm just waiting.
Holiday 47, myself and another unit.
So not far after the group passed by the first contact point with officers, the group then turned deeper into the residential area, turning on to 6710 South from Hollow Mill Drive. Lieutenant Bartlett ordered that patrol officers go to the front end of the event group, but to not allow the vehicles to pass this time. He ordered officers to warn those remaining in the street that they'd be arrested if they refused to leave the street. Lieutenant Bartlett also ordered officers to go to the back end of the group and to announce over the PA to move from the streets or risk arrest. In this video, from a pedestrian's point of view, officers are heard issuing commands over the PA.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not block the road. You can protest just along the sidewalk, but we need you out of the street.
Cause they the greatest. We tryna buy back our 40 acres. And for that paper, look how.
This video is an example of commands the officers gave over the PA. Again, officers aren't ordering people to vacate the area or go home. They're saying, don't block the streets. Do what you came to do, just do it on the sidewalks. Lieutenant Bartlett gives a command to the officers to arrest anyone who refuses to leave the street.
Ladies and gentlemen, please get out of the street. You're welcome to protest, but just not in the middle of the street. Do not block traffic. Please move to the sidewalk.
At the middle to the tail end of the group's procession, officers who are already on scene and those who are arriving continue to work with protesters, ordering them to the sidewalks over and again. Some who remained in the streets grew agitated, vocal, and even physically resistant. Even after the lieutenant had ordered arrests, officers are seen trying to negotiate with the people in the street. Some of these who remain in the street were who became violent when officers finally moved to make arrests.
Shut the fuck up! The cops. If you don't get off on the side, you will be arrested. Don't touch him.
This is my right to be here.
Get off on the sidewalk, or you're going to be arrested. That's it.
Fuck off. Hey, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that.
Then get off the side. Get off on the side right now. Off on the side.
That's all we have. I'm trying to get stop touching me. I'm trying to get everybody on the side. Fuck off. Fucking shoving it.
Get off on the side.
Fucking nerd.
If you
Get the fuck away from me.
Stay in the street, you will be arrested. Got it?
I'm trying to get people out of the street.
I'm glad.
So fuck off.
I'm glad, but you need to get there too. Hey, get on the sidewalk.
I don't feel like it.
Well, then you'll be arrested if you stay in the street. Sorry. Can you stay on the sidewalk, please?
Is this good enough? Or do I need to be right here?
It's good.
Cool.
As officers followed the tail end of the group and kept trying to get people from the street, officers arrived at the fore end of the march. At this point, as shown in the paused video, only the event vehicles and a handful of event pedestrians remained in the street. Most had obeyed the orders and moved to the sidewalk. Officers at this end of the event procession are who attempted the first arrest. You'll notice some of the event members who were among the first arrests were those who had been warned from the first contact and nevertheless remained in the street. As the officer went to arrest a man in the street, several other protesters are observed physically interfering with the officer's arrest attempts. Some are observed shoving the officers, grabbing at and pulling at the officers trying to make the arrest. A male with long hair is seen walking to and punching another officer in the face as the officer tried to keep individuals away from the first officer. From this angle, you can see how several event members converge when the officer begins struggling with the man in the gutter. You can also see that the arrest attempt was defeated, that the man who the officer attempted to arrest initially, and then the second male who blindsided the other officer, both escaped. Notice though that most of the event members are on the sidewalk and not interfering.
Yo! No! Back off! Back off! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
This officer's body-worn camera footage shows that officers soon find and arrest the man with the long hair who had just punched the officer. Several others, some who were observed interfering with the first arrest, charge in and interfere with and even assault officers as they made arrests.
Yes, I will. They're just right behind you. Yes, I will. I need you to come over here. You're a fucking pussy. Can you please grab them before they get stepped on? I will. What's your fucking badge number? You should come sit down right here. Sit down. Foot out, please.
This video was taken by a resident who lives near where the event group and the police met the second time. This video shows a larger view of the chaos happening in the driveway of the home across the street. I'd also like to point out here that, as you can see, most event participants are on the sidewalks. Only a handful of people stay engaged with police throughout, and only that handful of people seem to contribute to the chaotic nature of this incident. As seen in this officer's body cam footage, the final skirmishes play out on the street between the man officers had tried to arrest moments earlier, but who had escaped, and of another who refused to stay away from where the officers worked to make the arrest.
Hey, are we going to be allowed to continue on? Or? Hey, no, you're under arrest. Back up. Just back up though. Just let us secure this. Keep your distance. I don't know what's going on. Why are you waiting? Why are you watching? Why is it? No! You're a fucking danger! Get back there, I'll take you! Get back yourself! That was bullshit, man! Back up. Back up. That was bullshit, and that's on camera, man! He wants to commit war crimes! That is on fucking camera! You can't fucking recover from that shit! He wants to commit war crimes! Who's in charge? Who is this guy in charge here? Back up! I'll tell you again.
This video is from another angle of the final skirmishes in the street. It's another officer's body-worn camera footage. The video begins with an officer pleading with an event member to move to the sidewalk. It's one of many examples we've seen of the patience and repeated de-escalation attempts with the group. Also, remember that this interaction is happening after the first skirmishes between police and event goers, and yet the officer remains calm and tries to personally reason with this woman.
Not in the roadway.
Are you going to step on the curb for me? I'm only going to ask one more time. I don't want to have to do it.
For Christ's sakes. You can't. You can't because I'm not doing anything wrong.
So do you. Okay. Let's have you go back, okay? Take your camera out. We're going to have you put in the back of the car, okay?
No. I'm not going to the back of the car. I'm not doing anything wrong.
We'll put you, you're in the roadway, okay? We're trying to get one at a time. One at a time.
Am I in the roadway?
Fuck you up, Johnny. Okay, one at a time, okay? I don't want to have to enforce them that much. Ma'am, I need to have you step up, okay? I appreciate it very much.
I can walk in the street.
Okay, step up all the way, everybody up on there. Step away, step away, away, away. Step away. Roll. Step away, step away. Hey, you got it. Step away. You do the fucking job. Fuck you. We'll be you. Let me go. Do not stop. Do not stop resisting. Do not stop. Tase this guy again. You can have me. I'm not going to fight. Okay. Bring this around. Bring it around so you don't get tased again.
I didn't bite you. You shoved your arm into my mouth. No, you turned and bit me.
So now that we have the background of the event and the police responses, we now move to examine the event group and to examine the police. We'll begin with looking at the event, March for Justice, and the event members. One of the audit points was to try to determine if the event group violated any laws or ordinances. To answer this question, we'll break the event into two parts: pre-police contact and post-police contact. We know from speaking to city officials, parks officials, and the police department that prior to the August 2nd event, none had received any requests for assistance, nor had any received any applications for permits or requests to reserve space at the park. The police knew of this as they responded to the event on August 2nd, but used discretion to allow the event to continue anyway. So when is a special event permit required? As found on the city's website, the ordinance is as follows. I'll paraphrase some of it. A special events permit is required for all temporary events with an estimated number of 50 or more participants or having the following: closing of a street, blocking or restriction of public property, utilizing amplified sound, parades, or those requiring traffic migration or security. The ordinance also gives police the authority to, quote, immediately stop an unauthorized event and to issue citations. The process of applying for a permit can also be found through the city's website. It's a process where different entities of the city, police, fire, city admin, the public works, etc., are made aware of a proposed event and have a chance to give input on what resources might be necessary to support a special event, if any. Permit applications are required, or the applicants are required to declare the event type, the proposed plans, including the time, place, and number of participants. The city would more or less distribute the application to the department heads to review and give input. The application would eventually be approved or denied. If approved, the event organizers may have to pay the city for services such as police, fire, or medical services, and may be required to get other permits or licenses the health department or others may require. So for obvious reasons, city departments want to know if, for example, a section of the street would be shut down, or if a park full of people may be present, so that the proper resources are available and assigned to make sure that the event takes place safely and that no other function of the city are impaired. In some cases where sections of the street may be shut down for an event, the city correctly requires that the folks who live in the affected areas are notified of the closure ahead of time. So if we look at the August 2nd event and its use of the public spaces in Conwood Heights City, the event leadership, because of the group size and activity type, should have worked within the established permit processes. This slide is a shot we took back then of the city webpage. It's what anyone would have seen last summer had they gone to the site to see about getting a permit. As we're all aware, last summer, the pandemic seemed to be growing out of control. The city, trying to protect its citizens, correctly followed health department guidelines, and therefore we're not going to consider any event permit applications. This is a shot taken from the Parks and Recreation page. As can be found here, park pavilions may be reserved for a fee. We found from talking to the park manager that no one had reserved the pavilion for August 2nd. It would have been a moot point for a large group to try because of the COVID restrictions. But the manager knew that the March for Justice group intended to meet at the park on August 2nd. So to avoid any potential conflicts with smaller groups who may try to legitimately reserve the space for that day, the park manager blocked out the pavilion schedule in favor of the March for Justice group. The March for Justice group, to our knowledge, never has reached out to the parks manager or paid any fees for using the entire pavilion that day. If we now consider uses of city streets, some of the laws and ordinances include state laws and city and county ordinances, which more or less mirror one another. We see that it's illegal for a pedestrian to walk in the street where a sidewalk is available. City and county ordinances are strict and specific that even in the absence of a sidewalk, it's illegal for more than 2 pedestrians to walk side by side along the roadway. Protesters are observed in video arguing with officers about whether it's practical for the group to use the sidewalk. The protesters refuse that it's possible to fit all the protesters on the sidewalk, and the police insist that they'll fit and they should at least try. We see from several video and photo examples that in fact the event group did fit onto the sidewalk and that when ordered clearly to do so, they did it and remained there. Considering other laws and ordinances, we observed from various videos of the event that some in the event group use amplified sound for music and to address its members both at the park and while in the street. City ordinance as well as state statute prohibits making unreasonable noises in public places. This may be particularly applicable in residential neighborhood. We read witness statements taken from residents of the immediate area where this took place of how some were upset and frightened by the group's activity and noise, including the profane speech and the music the group had put over loudspeaker. Before we look at the potential criminal activity that occurred following the police's first contact with the group, we need to first answer another point. Was there a need or a duty for law enforcement to respond? We found the following passages while we looked through the Conwood Heights police policy. The Conwood Heights Police Department respects the right of people to peaceably assemble. It is the policy of this department not to unreasonably interfere with, harass, intimidate, or discriminate against persons engaged in the lawful exercise of their rights, while also preserving peace, protecting life, and preventing the destruction of property. The policy goes on. When responding to an unplanned or spontaneous gathering, responding officers should conduct an assessment and to see if there's any indicators of unlawful or disruptive activities. and for indicators that the lawful use of public facilities such as streets or walkways will be impacted. In this case, Lieutenant Bartlett saw counter-protesters early on who caused issues with the group. The group itself used the entire pavilion and some of the park with their event without permits or other reservations. The group consumed the streets curb to curb for about a block distance, not allowing traffic to enter or pass. The group used loudspeakers both at the park and in the streets and in the neighborhood as they marched. Considering these things, it seems reasonable to expect that the police should contact the group and at least try to set up some way that the event group could abide by the law and continue. Police, fire, and city workers routinely work similar permitted events like block parties, political events, private events, such as sporting events, school events, and so on. There are ways for events such as this one to take place in public spaces and to take place peacefully and within the existing laws. It's our opinion that the Cottonwood Heights City permitting processes and laws and ordinances regarding the use of public spaces seem both reasonable and necessary. When evaluating the acts of certain event members following the police's first contact with the group, we looked at statutes such as disorderly conduct, assaults against police officers, obstruction of justice, interfering with peace officers, theft, and or riot. Certain members of the event group were charged with some of these crimes. Some incidents are still under investigation. Investigators might still be trying to identify the actors. As we reviewed the incident, and specifically the things that happened from the time the officers tried to make the first arrest until that person was actually taken into custody, which is also the last physical confrontation between police and event members, we found about 50 substantial and notable actions. We found that those actions occurred in just an 8-minute and 27-second period. These acts include several assaults and a number of incidents of interference with arrests, a theft incident, as well as the officers' uses of force related to some of these. Specifically, we saw in video or photos certain event members who punched officers, shoved officers, grabbed and pulled at officers, an incident where one person who officers were grappling with on the ground pulled or twisted an officer's helmet to the point that the pressure of the chin strap caused the officer to nearly lose consciousness, and the theft of an officer's body-worn camera that had been knocked loose during a physical struggle with an arrestee. Many of the potentially criminal activities occurred simultaneous to others and involved several suspects, which is where the consideration of felony riot charges enters into this incident. So how many arrests occurred? Well, 8 were arrested and booked the evening of the incident, and then a total of 9 now are charged, and again, others are still under investigation. When we looked at possible assaults against officers, we found from reviewing video, photos, police, and medical reports that a range of assaultive acts against officers were observed or reported. These include shoving, closed fist strikes to the head and face, an officer being choked, and objects thrown at officers. When we looked at what officers' injuries were observed or reported in this incident, we found that the injuries included a near loss of consciousness, a deviated septum, a hip flexor strain, a thorax wall contusion, back and fascia tendon strains, shoulder rotator cuff or tendon strain, an elbow contusion, and eye or skin irritation. Some of the observed and reported injuries to arrestees or other civilians included scrapes, abrasions, bruises, muscle strains, eye and skin irritation, and puncture wounds from taser probes. Now for a look at the review point, was the police response appropriate? When we examined this police response and the uses of force here, we looked at whether the police had policy guidance for responding to such an incident and whether they followed existing policies, best practices, and case law. We found that the Cottonwood Heights Police Department has existing policies for responding to First Amendment assemblies, unplanned events, and unlawful assemblies. We found that they have policies for use of force and policies for uses of less lethal tools and control devices. We found some policy or procedure violations in this incident. Some examples are an officer not wearing proper equipment so that he's able to holster OC or baton during skirmishes, of officers not completely documenting uses of force, and of an officer giving a false name to a citizen when asked. We also see a general failure to plan on the part of the police administration, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. As a starting point for giving our findings for the use of force review in this case, I'll go over Utah's force and arrest statute. It gives very specific guidelines for any person, and in this case, a police officer, to use physical force. It says any person is justified in using any force except deadly force, which he reasonably believes to be necessary to effect an arrest or to defend himself or another from bodily harm while making an arrest. A specific Cottonwood Heights police policy also deals with the uses of force and adds to the guidelines given in statute. A police officer will never employ unnecessary force or violence and will use only such force in the discharge of duty as is reasonable in all circumstances. Force should be used only with the greatest restraint and only after discussion, negotiation, and persuasion have found to be ineffective or inappropriate. While use of force is occasionally unavoidable, every police officer shall refrain from applying the unnecessary affliction of pain or suffering, and will never engage in cruel, degrading, or inhumane treatment of any person. In this case, we did not observe police officers act in any obviously excessive or punitive manner. Specific allegations against police that we're aware of, such as arrestees being needlessly slammed to the ground, are unfounded. Allegations of officers beating a restrained prisoner are untrue, and the evidence of such is seen in reviewing the accuser's own phone video. Allegations that an officer throat punched a protester were found to be patently false. Use of force never looks good, even in the most clearly justified circumstances. This case is no exception. So in summary, the review found no observed incidents of excessive force used against citizens, that the police responses and actions were measured and appropriate, and that the officers showed deference to the group's constitutionally protected activities. The police used appropriate discretion regarding the group's violation of certain laws and ordinances, both pre and post contact. As I mentioned, the police could have, and perhaps in some circumstances, should have made more arrests, but they didn't. They didn't try to shut down the event altogether. They offered an alternative to occupying the streets and for the event to continue. They gave a little to the group and rightly expected a little back to maintain peace and avoid injury or issues with access to the public places. Police made reasonable attempts to de-escalate tense interactions. They made clear, repeated, and lawful orders before taking arrest actions. The uses of force in this incident were found to have been necessary and justified to stop criminal violations of law, prevent escape from and interference with lawful arrests, and to protect the safety of other officers. We found in reviewing uses of force that officers provided proper aftercare. Officers summoned and assisted with treatment of arrestees as soon as they were able. Officers were observed making efforts to protect arrestees from the extreme heat of the day, placing them in shade and allowing other members to give them water. Officers were observed gathering arrestees' personal property, such as sunglasses one arrestee had dropped. We saw that once the fight was off, officers didn't punish or badger the arrestees. So I want to make another point clear that we observed that most of the event goers were relatively peaceful. Though they were trying to express their obvious frustration with government policies, they obeyed police orders. They did not interfere with police officers dealing with problem people. They were holding signs or wearing shirts with messages of protest and were otherwise behaving lawfully. At this point, as shown in the still shot here, only the event vehicles and a handful of event pedestrians remain in the street. At the point that officers set up in the street to stop the event vehicles, this photo shows that the larger share of the event members are on the sidewalks and being relatively peaceful. It's only the event organizers and a handful of event members who remain in the streets and who seem to instigate and provoke others, as well as the police. Out of approximately 130 to 150 people there that day, only 9 have been criminally charged to this point. Among them were those who were up front and center when the police first contacted the group, those who remained in the street after repeated orders to move to the sidewalk, or those who interfered with officers making arrests. Event organizers and a certain few others were the first to resist or argue. Some of them admitted that they controlled the crowd. They commented that they had done other similar events. A local news article printed just days before the August 2nd Cottonwood Heights event quoted an anonymous organizer, who we believe was among the same group, about how they marched to Sim Gill's home but encountered police instead. The anonymous organizer is quoted as saying that after they were met by police, they turned back and played the NWA song, F the Police, just as they had done after the first encounter with Cottonwood Heights police on August 2nd. It seemed to some extent that the event organizers were prepared to clash with the police on the Cottonwood Heights event. They had music cued. They had security to control the crowd. They were prepared to deal with counter protesters or other citizens who refused or disagreed with them. Following the arrest and when most of the protesters were leaving, one of the organizers remained, commenting over a loudspeaker that his group does a peaceful protest every Sunday.
By cops, in his back, no weapon on him for nothing. And then we come out here and this is what we deal with. We run a peaceful protest every Sunday. Follow Our Streets SLC on Instagram. We do a peaceful protest every Sunday, every police district that we've done. We did it all around the city. We said we're going to come to Cottonwood Heights in memory of Zane this week. Thanks to our shirt and our district attorney, Sim Gills, this is everybody on the back of my t-shirt who is a victim of police brutality and was murdered in the hands of police. And we were trying to be honoring his family and showing love because we are a community and dancing through the streets. They came, stopped us, beat us up, pepper sprayed us, and then they're going to impound all our vehicles. They're going to impound this vehicle, that vehicle, just because we are peacefully protesting.
From what we've seen, we believe the man is mostly correct about the events being peaceful. Most have been without incident and most participants are relatively peaceful. But if confronted by the police or anyone else who tried to dissuade the event activity, some seem to have other intentions. As another example of the patience officers had with this incident, even as police and fire are trying to wrap up, the man with the loudspeaker harasses and antagonizes them, using profane language and derogatory epithets, and the police let it go.
Where is the guy in the shorts and the white tee? All you officers that are dumb as hell, where's the guy in the shorts and the white tee? All you that are born legs first. Where's the guy in the shorts and the white tee? Where's Boss Man at? Where's Q-Tip? This is the bullshit we deal with. My First Amendment tells me I can talk all the shit I want to talk and you can't do nothing about it. That can look the scum and crumbs between my toe crust. And I don't give a damn. For all you white folks that are in the police department, I hope you get sunburned and peel the hell off tonight. Thanks to Mama Lennon, I don't burn for shit. Use sunscreen, your elbows look kind of pink. You guys look like you guys have hot dogs for elbows. Hey boss, is your head peeled in the sun? That's fucked up.
The police had planned to tow this man's truck, but even after this behavior, police negotiate with this guy that if he'd leave in peace, he could take his truck and go. A review point was if the police response could have been better. We have to ask ourselves among many different response scenarios if no response at all was appropriate and what the consequences may have been. In this case, before the event group even left the park, there was a confrontation with counter-protesters. We'll see in another video that a resident in the neighborhood where this all took place was apparently upset that the street was blocked and she couldn't leave her driveway. The resident and an event goer argue with one another about the event. The middle photo here is not of this incident, but is from another incident that occurred in Utah. It's where a protester is accused of shooting at a motorist who had tried to get through a group of protesters who blocked the streets. The other photo is a stock photo, but it illustrates a concern for issues large groups may cause when they spontaneously gather in public places like the street. Only the event organizers at the August 2nd event knew what route the group would take that day. In hindsight, it's probable that they would have ended up on 2300 East to go to the site where Zane James had been killed in a police shooting years earlier, or that the group may end up on Fort Union. Either scenario would likely have been an issue with Sunday afternoon traffic. Would the event group occupy these streets? Would they have issues with inconvenienced motorists? Would the event members be safe as they made the crossings? Considering previous events that took place in the area last summer, police were on edge, worrying about incidents such as that occurred at the DA's office. One woman who was charged in the property destruction incident at the DA's office last summer was seen in video at the August 2nd Conwood Heights event. Hers was one of the cars observed in the street at the Conwood Heights March, and she was seen in the street interfering as police were attempting to arrest another event goer. With all of these issues to consider, it seems that some sort of police response was indicated here. No response was not an option. With that in mind, could the response have been better? We believe that with the systems, policies, and procedures Conwood Heights Police have, and based upon responses to other recent events, this response probably could have been better. This is no surprise revelation to the Conwood Heights Police Administration. We've discussed this with them. We believe they're capable of handling these issues and, when properly prepared, even events that might go bad. The response to this event was reported to us to be more or less minimal, a minimal response, in hopes that there wouldn't be any issues. No real event plan was drawn up. Little pre-event planning happened here. As we saw with this event, it only took a few event goers behaving badly to nearly overwhelm the handful of Conwood Heights officers who had been held over shift or assigned as part of a shift to respond to this event. The officers there did a good job, but there weren't enough of them to deal with the issues. It seems to come back to a planning problem in this case. So what systems, policies, and procedures do the police have? The Conwood Heights Police have what's called a First Amendment Assemblies policy. In it are specific guidelines for how to plan, prepare, and deal with these situations. A section of the policy deals specifically with an operations plan. The operational plan outlined in policy would account for command responsibilities, properly staffing the incident, including mutual aid. The plan would deal with equipment or other supplies. It would deal with handling and transporting arrestees. It would deal with any criminal investigations needed or intelligence gathering. It would have the command staff working with legal staff and establishes rules of engagement. It would have a plan for a liaison between the government and the demonstrators. To illustrate just one point in this policy, a liaison with the demonstrators, if the administration had assigned someone to reach out to the event group leadership, if possible, beforehand and discuss the laws and ordinances that must be followed and help the group with alternate plans and support, if possible, the incident may have been less dramatic. And what maybe could have been accomplished with a well-prepared and briefed 20 to 25 officers turned into an urgent response from many dozens of officers from all over the valley who responded blindly to an urgent call for assistance. The police administration's approach to this event was probably good in spirit, but it may have also contributed to the overall negative outcome. Another issue we saw with this case was that following the arrest, the DA's office didn't end up filing charges against many of the arrestees or referred the cases to city prosecutors for lesser charges. From what we observed this incident, charges for assaults and interference and even felony charges for acts of riot were and still are appropriate for some in the incident. However, we understand why the DA's office may have decided not to file on some at the time. Some probable cause statements from booking process were lacking sufficient detail. Some written reports were also lacking. When an officer makes an arrest, they're required to get reports to prosecutors as soon as possible. It's because prosecutors are required to file formal charges within a very slim time frame and may depend heavily on written reports, video footage, or other evidence in making charging determinations. If it all fails, those arrested walk away. In this case, officers needed time to debrief, to review body-worn or in-car camera footage, or other footage or evidence we've seen to accurately describe criminal activity and the who's and what's in it. The evidence to support greater charges in this case is there. We've seen it. We noted several dozen acts that occurred in less than 9 minutes between police and arrestees. We spent hundreds of hours reviewing those videos, hundreds more writing about what we've seen, but we've had many months to do it. Knowing that, the police department needed someone to step up and better coordinate with the prosecutor's office to be sure that the reports were clear and complete, submitted as soon as possible, and that any video or other supporting evidence was noted in reports and delivered. The final review items are Council Member Natalie Bruce and Police Chief Robbie Russo. What role did they have in this incident? We found from searching Councilmember Bruce's social media that she'd apparently been aware of the event and advertised it by posting the flyer we saw in the beginning of this presentation to her own page. Councilmember Bruce was apparently aware that the group would take to the streets for this event, but she apparently didn't communicate it to anybody at the city. Councilmember Bruce is observed in video footage as being among those who first interfaced with the police. Councilmember Bruce is observed in her own video, as well as other citizens' video and body-worn camera, being physically repelled several times and by at least 2 police officers. The incidents occur in an area of private property where officers were in the acts of arresting or attempts to make arrests. As can be seen here, the officer who deals with Councilmember Bruce is very busy providing overwatch for the officers behind him. So this video shows some of those incidents, and I'll direct your attention to the lower right-hand portion of the screen here. This is Councilmember Bruce. This is another angle of the same incidents, and this is Councilmember Bruce's own video.
We just unleashed gas on someone with a water bottle. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Oh my God! What is wrong with you? What? I'm on the sidewalk. You can't push me in this road. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! I don't have to. Get back. I don't have to get back. Yes, you do. Bullshit. Why do I have to get back? Because you're tasing someone over a water bottle? You're tasing someone over a water bottle?
You coward motherfucker!
You're a coward! God! What is wrong with you guys? What is wrong with you? Fucking guys! I just got back! Oh my God! What is wrong with you guys? I can't see!
Back up!
I don't have to! Oh my God! Oh my God! You just fucking killed me! I cannot.
So after having been ordered from the driveway already, Councilmember Bruce is seen in this video crossing through the driveway again. I'll direct your attention to the mid screen here. This video is of the same incident just shown. It shows another officer trying again to remove her from the area. Councilmember Bruce returns yet again, and this time asks the homeowner for permission to remain. The homeowner refuses. She then mentions that she's a council member.
The person did not touch him.
Back away, please. Back away.
This is a crime scene.
This is a crime scene.
Yeah, your crime. Your crime. Hey, really now? Oh my God. This is the homeowner.
You guys are right here. This is why we're up here. Get back. You guys are
With a fucking baton. This is so outrageous. Homeowners mortified. This is happening on their property. I cannot believe this. I cannot believe this is happening. I
cannot believe we have pepper sprayed people in Cottonwood Heights.
You just shut the fuck up. You fucking shit. You just sprayed me on the sidewalk. Yeah, you did it? All right, look at the face.
Hey, sir, real quick, sir. As a homeowner, do I have permission to be on your driveway?
No.
Your city councilwoman, Sally.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to meet you.
In this video, Councilmember Bruce engages with another woman who is apparently frustrated that she can't leave her driveway because of the blocked street. Councilmember Bruce chastises the woman, apparently for not supporting the event cause herself.
I'm sorry, did you?
They'd like you to leave. And if
All
you're
right.
a councilwoman, you should act better.
You should be ashamed that you're willing to sacrifice these people for your traffic convenience.
And to review Chief Russo. Chief Russo was aware of the August 2nd incident before it took place and assigned Lieutenant Bartlett to prepare for it. Chief Russo was aware of Lieutenant Bartlett's plan to handle the event. It seems reasonable that Chief Russo should bear responsibility for the success or potential failures with this incident. We reviewed video footage where Chief Russo was present from the early parts of the police interaction with the group all the way to the end, where officers were actively attempting to make arrests. We saw Chief Russo acting as overwatch to arresting officers, escorting arrestees from the area, and video of Chief Russo interacting calmly with upset event goers. The review found that Chief Russo's actions while on scene in this incident were appropriate. He acted in accordance with his assigned duties as police chief and within his authority as a peace officer. So our summary of the review will be in print, as you see. I'll read it into the record. The city had not received any requests for assistance nor requisite permit applications where available. For an event group of that size and purpose to assemble at Mill Hollow Park Pavilion, to occupy the city streets with pedestrian and vehicle traffic the group was observed to have done, or to use loudspeakers at the park or adjacent streets that afternoon. A small number of the event group were observed refusing repeated orders from police officers. Certain members were observed punching officers or shoving officers. Certain group members were observed physically blocking officers who were attempting to make arrests. A member was observed to have stolen an officer's body-worn camera after it had been knocked loose from the officer's uniform. The police had a need or duty to respond. The police responses and actions were measured and appropriate. They showed deference to the group's constitutionally protected activities. Police used appropriate discretion regarding the group's violation of certain laws and ordinances, both pre and post contact. Police made reasonable attempts to de-escalate tense interactions and made clear, repeated, and lawful orders before taking arrest actions. A total of 8 people were arrested and booked the day of the incident. One other was charged on a later date. Charges include, or investigations have considered, crimes of failure to obey lawful orders to leave the city streets, assaults against peace officers, disorderly conduct, interfering with arrest, obstruction of justice, theft, and riot. Officers were observed to have suffered injuries related to the assaults, obstructive and or resistive acts of some of the arrestees. Arrestees, as well as some who were never apprehended or arrested, were observed to have suffered minor injuries related to the officers' OC or taser deployment, baton strikes, and other physical force delivered in efforts to arrest individuals or protect other officers who worked to make arrests. No incidents of excessive force against citizens were observed. The uses of force in this incident were found to have been necessary and justified to stop criminal violations of law, prevent escape from and interference with lawful arrests, and to protect the safety of other officers. The review found some procedural, departmental, and policy violations. Councilmember Bruce was observed in several videos as being present during the incident and is among those criminally charged. The review found that Chief Russo's actions as a police chief and peace officer while on the scene of this incident were appropriate. Chief Russo was observed interacting calmly with citizens and offering support to arresting officers when necessary, and in accordance with his authority and assigned duties. So other observations and suggestions are as follows. The city and police department have existing policies, ordinances, and procedures related to the activities and enforcement demonstrated in this incident. The Conwood Heights Police should prepare for such events to include training, pre-event planning, intelligence gathering, targeted communication with members of citizen groups, and an operations plan and information dissemination to its own members. Suggested improvements include utilizing an incident command system, an operations plan with post orders, report writing, pre-event communications and outreach, event communication, equipment, call-out procedures, critical incident debriefing, screening procedures, and city ordinance and departmental or city policy training. The Conwood Heights Police should consider working with neighboring jurisdictions to streamline interagency responses to such incidents, to cooperate for a more uniform, organized, and efficient response. Conwood Heights City may consider reviewing ordinances and permit processes regarding the use of public spaces for spontaneous or planned citizen gatherings, to confirm that the process is simple, timely, efficient, widely available, and accommodates protected speech activities, while also preserving the peace and safety of other citizens who reside, work, or travel through the area, and maybe consider posting additional signage. The review found many video recorded examples of officers who had attempted to reason with the event group members, including examples of officers pleading with group members for their compliance with requests or orders to leave the streets and to continue the event on the sidewalks. In general, most attendees obeyed direction from officers on scene, and overall were observed to have been relatively peaceful throughout the incident. Some individuals among the group, either those who appeared to be part of the March for Justice event leadership or those in their immediate fringe, seemed determined to challenge any member of the public and any police officer who made any attempt to dissuade or otherwise influence the group's activity. So in closing, we sincerely hope that this information was helpful. Firstly, to the citizens who are aware of the incident and only heard sound bites or only saw selective or inflammatory footage in the news or social media about it. We hope it was helpful to the city government and that it accomplished the things it set out to do with this request for audit. We hope it was helpful to those people who marched that day to see it from another perspective. We understand that there are some hard feelings related to this incident. We hope that we can all find common ground and cultivate better relationships and to return soon to peaceful and meaningful discourse. Thank you. That's the conclusion of the presentation.
This is Mayor Peterson once again, and I want to thank the AG's office for the presentation and for their candor and their hundreds and hundreds of hours of time spent on the public's behalf and our city's behalf. Again, the report will be made public, I guess later this evening. It'll be on our website. But again, our appreciation and thanks to Mr. Thompson and Spencer Austin and the team that has worked on this challenging review. I want to remind our council members that they may submit any written questions for the AG's office to Tim, our city manager. We'll forward them as a group of questions to AG's office for their response. And I'm sure this is a lot to digest, and there'll be some questions. We appreciate the AG's office sensitivity to those questions. Please have all those questions submitted to him maybe by a week from today, if you would, so the AG's response can be circulated to the council before council discussions concerning this report in the near future. Again, a time will be set aside in an upcoming council meeting to discuss the AG's report. Likely the council's June 1st meeting is most likely because our next meeting is primarily focused on budget, though this is a very, very important topic. Due to the lawsuit recently filed concerning the police response to the August 2nd incident, future council discussions concerning any issues involved in the pending litigation probably will need to occur in a closed meeting as permitted by the Open Public Meetings Act. Again, I want to thank everyone for your patience and understanding tonight. And now I'd like to propose, as previously announced, to close tonight's work session. And at this time, I'd entertain such a motion from one of our council members.
I'm going to work on getting everyone back in. Give me 1 second.
All right.
Here, it looks like I've successfully come on. I'd be happy to make a motion to adjourn our meeting tonight. We
Okay,
can wait for a few minutes until someone is around a second, but
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Bracken. The motion's been made to adjourn. I'm now waiting for a second.
All right, I'm looking for Doug and Tally still. I'm not seeing them in the meeting any longer. Let's see. Oh, wait. Never mind. Found Doug.
It's been moved by Councilmember Bracken. Do I have?
And I will second that, Mayor. I just got my mute muted.
Again, appreciate everybody's understanding and patience. This is a unique approach, but it's been moved by Councilmember Bracken, seconded by Councilmember Peterson. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yes.
Councilmember Michael.
Yes.
And Councilmember Bruce.
I can't find her in the meeting any longer.
Well, and I will vote yes. Again, I appreciate for everybody's understanding and patience, and this special work session is now adjourned. Good evening.
Thanks, Mayor.